I'm back for another try a chapter video. We'll find out, am I going to keep these books and read them this year, or is it time to unhaul them? Hello book friends, I'm Jen and welcome to my reading life and welcome to another try a chapter video. I thought it was time that I pulled some books off of my shelves and try to decide if I want to keep them and read them sometime this year or if I'm going to unhaul them. If it's just time for them to go on their merry way and find some other reader to love them. I have pulled 9 books off of my shelves. We will see if I get through them all today, but I really would like to if possible. I am going to read a chapter from each of them and then I will come on here and let you know my thoughts and whether I'm going to keep them or unhaul them, and then we will round everything up at the end and see how many books are still left on my shelf. Grab a cup of tea and I'm going to show you all 9 of the books first, and then I'll give you the synopsis of each book after I read the chapter. Let us get going. If you have watched my January and February wrap-up videos, you will know that the books that I pulled off of my shelves as part of my 25 in 2025 books to read this year have not been going very well. I have DNF'd quite a few of the ones that I have tried to read already, and I'm feeling a little hesitant about some of the others that I pulled that have been on my shelves for a very long time. I have pulled 4 of those today to read a chapter and decide, should I keep them or is it just time for them to go? I'm going to go through those 4 first, show you their titles, and then I will go through the 5 additional books that I just randomly pulled off my shelves as ones that I just felt a little bit unsure about as to whether or not I still want to read these books. So let me show you what they all are. So the first 4 are off my 25 in 2025. If you haven't seen that video, I will link it in the cards and in the description box below, so you can check that out as well. The first book is On Rue Tatan. This is by Susan Loomis. This is a nonfiction book. Then next is another nonfiction book, actually, which is a Tuscan Childhood by Kinta Beevor. Then I have 2 novels. The first is First Friends by Marcia Willett. Marcia Willett can be a little hit or miss for me, so I'm going to see what I think of this one. And then the final one is On Canaan's Side by Sebastian Barry. Those are the 4 books off of my 25 in 2025. The next 5 books are 5 that I just randomly pulled off my shelf, and the first one is A Very Special Year by Thomas Montasser. And then we have The Invisible Husband of Frick Island by Colleen Oakley. Next is One Night on the Island by Josie Silver. I clearly have an island theme going here. Next is Law's Orchestra Saves the World by Alexander McCall Smith. And then finally, I have Midnight Blue by Simone van der Vlugt. And those are the 9 books that I'm going to try a chapter of each and then tell you what I think of them. I am going to go and read the first chapter of the first book. I'm going to start with On Rue Tatan by Susan Loomis, and then I'm going to be back in just a moment and I will tell you what I thought. I am back and I have finished about the first 15 pages of On Rue Tatan. The first chapter was quite long and I was really drawn into this. In the first chapter, we follow Susan as she is going as a young woman to Paris to a cooking school to learn how to cook. And she is just kind of describing that experience, and at the end of the section that I read, she had just spent a weekend in the south of France with a family. She had some list of families who are willing to host tourists for a few days, as long as the person was willing to sort of do whatever the family wanted them to do. And she had a really lovely experience doing that. And yes, I'm very captivated by this. And it sounds like the rest of the book is going to be a lot about this home that she and her husband purchased later on in the town of, what is the town's name? Louviers. They purchased an old, it used to be a convent on Rue Tatan, and they fix it up because it's definitely, there's a picture of it here on the back. You can see it's like, oh, let me show you here. You can see it's kind of ramshackle, so I think they spent a lot of time renovating the house. And there are a couple of recipes at the end of every chapter. That's always fun. I do love a good recipe in a book. And yes, so I'm definitely keeping this, and I'm definitely going to read this. I think this might be a good, like, beginning of summertime read, because she talks so much about like the fresh produce and food and stuff. And I don't know, when summer comes, just because produce is so good during the summertime, I thought that might be a good time to read this. So this one is staying. And then next up, I'm going to read the next nonfiction, which is A Tuscan Childhood. So I'll be back with my thoughts on this one. I've gained a friend, as you can see. Huey decided to join me while I was reading. Now he's going to have a little grooming session. So I read the first chapter of A Tuscan Childhood, and I guess the nonfiction is winning for me right now. This definitely sucked me in. It starts off in 1916 when Quinta and her mother and her brother, or brothers, I think she has two brothers, are going to this castle that the family owns to see how it's kind of being taken care of by the soldiers during World War I who are occupying it. And that's, you sort of get her first glimpse of that, and you hear the story of how her father purchased the castle. And yes, so I definitely like a memoir. I didn't realize, or hadn't really sort of noticed, that this took place in the early part of the 20th century. So from World War I through World War II, and I think a little bit after that. So yeah, I'm definitely going to keep this one, and this might be another good summer read, or maybe early summer or late spring. I don't know, but yes. So going to learn a little bit about Tuscany in Italy, and that sounds just lovely. And then next, I'm going to try a chapter of First Friends by Marcia Willett, and we'll see what I think of this one. I'll be back. I am back, and I actually took a little break to eat some lunch. And while I had my lunch, I actually did the first two chapters of the next two books. So let us get into those. First up was First Friends by Marcia Willett. Actually, I did not read the first chapter. I read the prologue. And in the prologue, one of the main characters, there are two women who are like best friends, and I think the book is about them. But one of the woman's 15-year-old daughter has died, and they're at the funeral. And that is taking place in 1981. And then the first chapter goes back to 1964. And I know myself, and I really, really have a hard time reading about children dying. And it is just going to be looming over me the whole time I read this, if I read it, worrying about what's going to happen to this young girl. So I'm going to unhaul this book for that reason. I mean, the way it was written, like, was fine, but I know I can't handle that, and I don't want to. So I'm going to say goodbye to this, and I'm sure somebody else will read it and love it, but not me. And then the last book from my 25 and 2025 stack that I pulled was On Canaan's Side by Sebastian Barry. And I actually ended up going into the second chapter of this. So in this book, we are following Lily, and she is Irish, but she lives in the US now, and her grandson Bill has just committed suicide. And he's young, he's like 19 or 20, I think, when this happens. No, he must be older than that. He must be in his 20s. He's been to the war in Kuwait, and he's come back. He's obviously been traumatized by that, and he took his own life. And this novel follows the 17 days following Bill's death. And Lily, I think, is going to kind of take us through her life. And while it definitely has sort of a melancholy feel to it, something about it is very engaging. The writing feels a bit like a cross between Marilynne Robinson and Wendell Berry. That very intimate kind of first-person narrative, and I'm very much drawn into that. Now, Sebastian Barry is an Irish author, and I'm actually thinking I'm just going to continue reading this month so I can count it towards a book for the Irish Readathon. And yes, so I'm drawn in. I'm not 100% sure how I'm going to feel about it you know, as a book as a whole. But it's not very long, and I mean, it's only a little over 200 pages, like 250 pages. So yes, I'm going to give this one a try. So this one I'm keeping. Now we are going to head into the stack of the other 5 books that I pulled off of my shelf. And first up is going to be A Very Special Year by Thomas Montasser. And we'll see what I think of this one. So I'll be back after I read the first chapter. I am back. I have read the first very short chapter of A Very Special Year. And for some reason, I had it in my mind that this book was French and was set in France, but actually it's German. The author is German. It is translated from German and takes place in Germany. And I'm not sure I've read any modern novels translated from German. And the very short little first chapter drew me in completely. We follow this older woman who owns, it's not specified in the first chapter, but you know from the blurb that it's a bookstore. And she is sort of like closing up for the night, but apparently this precedes her then disappearing. And then I think her niece? Yes. Her niece is going to inherit the store and come in, and I think she wants to like prep it to get it ready for sale. But then there's this mysterious novel that doesn't have an ending that apparently when you read it, the ending changes according to whoever reads it. So there's a little bit of something, maybe magical realism happening in this book. And yes, I am definitely going to read this. Very much drawn into it. I really wanted to just keep going, so that's always a good sign. So yes, this one is staying on my TBR shelf. Next up is going to be The Invisible Husband of Frick Island, and I'm going to read the first chapter and then I will come back and share my thoughts. I'm back. I read the first chapter of The Invisible Husband of Frick Island, and it was fine. It was perfectly good. The writing was nice. But I feel like it's one of those books where I can see exactly what's going to happen. And I just don't know if there's anything in this that's going to feel like new and fresh to me. And I know that sounds kind of terrible, but I think it just, I don't know. Have I sort of lost my desire to read those sort of, and this is going to sound terrible, but sort of generic kind of rom-com kind of books, which this sort of sounds like it's going to be, maybe a little bit of a twist on that. But we're following this young woman and her husband Tom. They live on Frick Island. He's a crab fisherman, and they've only been married for about a year, but they've been dating since high school, and she's very much in love with her husband. And she goes and waits for him to come in on his fishing boat every day. And one day he doesn't come back. And she's told that there was like a Mayday signal sent out, but before he could give coordinates, he got cut off. And of course they go searching for him, can't find him. And then a few days later, they find the boat submerged in the bottom of the Chesapeake Bay, and his body isn't recovered. And she goes into denial about him being dead. And it sounds like for the majority of the novel, she imagines that he's still alive. And so she talks to him and she cooks for him and she goes out to eat with him. And then there's going to be another man, a journalist, I think, who's coming to cover some cakewalk event that's happening on the island. And then he gets sort of invested in this story of this woman who has kind of convinced everyone to go along with imagining that her dead husband is just invisible, but still alive. I mean, it sounds kind of cute and quirky, and, you know, maybe in a different mood, I might say, yes, this is a book I want to read. But because I have so many books on my shelves that I do want to get to, and this just feels like it would be an okay read, but not a great read for me, I'm going to unhaul this one. And I'm pretty sure this is one I could get from the library or find on audio if I wanted to listen to it at some point. But I think I'm going to pass this along, and I'm sure somebody else will get this book and just absolutely love it. So this one is going in the unhaul pile. And then next is another like rom-com book, and that is One Night on the Island. And I read One Day in December by this author, gosh, right when it came out, which has been quite a few years now. And I really, really liked it. Again, I kind of feel like maybe my contemporary rom-com reading days might be past a little bit. So I'm going to give this a go, and I'll be back in a minute to let you know what I think. Curmudgeonly me is back. I just read the first chapter of One Night on the Island. And yeah, this is going to be an unhaul because I do think I am just sort of done with that contemporary rom-com and that kind of single angsty woman who is approaching 30 and, you know, suddenly her biological clock is ticking and she doesn't have a boyfriend and yada, yada, yada. You know, I do like Josie Silver's writing. It's very fresh and pithy, and it's very readable. But yeah, I just feel like I'm past reading about that sort of angsty part of your life when you're still single and you're wanting to get married and all your friends are getting married and having babies. And yes, that's just not where I am in my life anymore. And it's just not something I really have a huge desire to read about. So I'm going to pass this one along as well. So this goes into the unhaul pile. And next up is going to be Law's Orchestra Saves the World by Alexander McCall Smith. And I really love the #1 Ladies Detective Agency. I've been a little bit hit or miss on other books by Alexander McCall Smith. And yes, but we will see what I think of this one. I think this is a standalone. So I'll give the first chapter a read and then I'll be back. I am back. I've read the first chapter of Law's Orchestra Saves the World, and yes, I'm definitely going to keep this one and read it. I was drawn into the story. We have two older men, brothers, who are traveling to the Suffolk, I can say that, Suffolk countryside, and they are going to, sounds like their childhood home, but there is a woman, Law, of the title, who sounds like was influential in their early life, but it was also influential through World War II maybe, and to this village and maybe to the world. I don't know, but I am very intrigued to find out. So this book I'm going to keep, and I'm definitely going to read it maybe very soon because I was really drawn into this. So I do like Alexander McCall Smith's writing. It's very lovely. Okay, we're down to the final book, and that is Midnight Blue by Simone van der Vlugt. And yes, I'm going to give this a go, and I will come back and let you know what I think after the first chapter. I am back. I read the first chapter of Midnight Blue, and I was definitely drawn into the story. I had forgotten this is a historical fiction set in Amsterdam in 1654. And in this, we are following Katrine, and she's 25, and her husband has just passed away. But it is a marriage that happened because she got pregnant and she did not love him. And so she is now going to sell up the property she has inherited from her husband and leave the small village that she has grown up in and go to Amsterdam and make her way in the big city. She's going to get a job, I think, as a housekeeper. And then it's going to end up that it sounds like she makes her way to working in the pottery shop where they make the Delft porcelain, which is that famous blue and white porcelain from Amsterdam. You can see I like blue and white china, and so I'm definitely intrigued to learn more about that through this historical fiction novel. So this one is definitely going to stay on the shelf. And that was a very successful try a chapter session. So to recap, I am going to unhaul 3 of the books. So I'm going to unhaul First Friends by Marcia Willett. Don't want to read about that young girl dying. And then I'm going to unhaul The Invisible Husband of Frick Island by Colleen Oakley. And then also One Night on the Island by Josie Silver. So both the Island books are going to go. And then I am going to keep the remaining 6 books that I tried a chapter of and read them this year. So obviously Midnight Blue, which I just talked about, and then Law's Orchestra Saves the World by Alexander McCall Smith, and On Canaan's Side by Sebastian Barry. Actually, I'm going to set this one over here because I am going to continue reading that one right now. And then A Very Special Year by Thomas Montasser. Yes, Montasser. And then A Tuscan Childhood by Kinta Beevor. And finally, On Rue Tatan by Susan Loomis. And I think what I'm going to do with the 6 books that I am keeping is, well, other than the one I'm just going to continue reading right now, but the remaining 5, I'm going to just put these with my 25 and 2025 books that I want to read, because I do want to read these all this year and I don't want to forget about them. And because I check that shelf every month when I'm putting together my TBR so that I make sure I at least take a couple of books off there each month, these will be front and center, so I won't forget them. And I think when I do other try chapters this year, which I will definitely be doing more of, I will continue to just add books to that stack so that they are close at hand and I don't forget that I want to read them this year. I definitely think, as I have been looking at my bookshelves over the past couple of months, when I've been pulling out books that I want to read, or just kind of, browsing my shelves as I like to do, I really want to weed out those books that I just don't think I maybe want to read anymore. And, I don't want to keep them on my shelves if I'm not going to ever read them. So I will definitely be doing future try chapters where I pull random books and then try to decide if they need to stay or they need to go. And hopefully that will also just kind of help whittle out some of the books that, I just don't need to have anymore. And that makes more, I was going to say that allows for more books, but that is not the purpose of this year. I'm not trying to add more books to my bookshelf. I am trying to work down the number of unread books that I have and increase the number of read books that I have on my shelf. That is my goal for this year. But taking out those books that I just really don't think I want to read anymore, especially because, a lot of these books, I think if I did ever want to read them again, I could find them in my library, get an audiobook, find a cheap copy secondhand. So it's not like these books have to be gone forever, but rather than having them just sitting on my shelf and me never getting to them, that just seems silly. So, and I really just want to have books on my unread shelf that I am really drawn to and really want to read. So that is what I am using these try chapters for this year. So I'll probably try to do these try chapters every month and a half or 2 months, just so I can, make it through some of the books that maybe I just am no longer interested in reading. And that happens, right? Our reading tastes change as time goes on. And I'm not saying that any of these books that I'm unhauling aren't wonderful books to read. I'm sure that they are. They're just books that I don't want to read right now. And so, I'm going to clear them off of my shelf. And that will do it for this try a chapter video. I would love to chat with you down in the comments. Have you read any of the books that I have tried a chapter of here? Do any of them sound particularly intriguing to you if you haven't read any of them? But I would love to know if you have any opinions about either the books that I kept. Do you think I will like them? Not like them? Do you think I'm making a mistake with the 3 books that I'm unhauling? I don't think I am, but let me know your thoughts in the comments. I do love chatting with you down there. And if you don't have anything that you'd like to add down in the comments, but would like to let me know that you were here, because comments really do help my channel, why don't you leave me some kind of blue emoji, because we have the blue and white from Midnight Blue. Yes, leave me something blue in the comments, and I do love seeing that you were here and that you made it this far in the video. Comments really, really do help my channel. And if you did enjoy this video, if you could hit that like button and subscribe if you aren't already subscribed, I would love to have you join my bookish community. And as always, I'll be back with another video very soon. Bye!